Well, while we're in Barnasmore Gap, it brings me on smoothly to my next story. A story that I collected a couple of years ago that I was fortunate to collect. And it may well be a report of the last ever highwayman operating in all of Ireland. And the year, folks, is not the 17th, 18th, or even 19th century. The year date is 1908. Why 1908, folks? Because 1908 was the year that the British brought in the pension into Ireland. And at the time, it was the princely sum of 5 shillings per week, about 25 pence. Now, this mightn't sound much to us nowadays with all our disposable income, but believe me, there were country people living throughout Ireland then that never had regular money in their pockets. A lot of rural country working people used to swap work in kind rather than get paid in wages. So this money was like a mini windfall to a lot of rural country people. And a lot of our lovely village post offices that are still dotted around Ireland actually date from the year 1908, because older people could only walk maybe 2 or 3 miles maximum to collect their old age pension. Well, folks, one particular enterprising man that lived around Barnasmore Gap, it must have been in the blood. His name was Mark Byrne. And Mark Byrne's people were great horse people. And he had a white steed, one of the fastest horses in Ireland back then. And Mark Byrne decided that he would get on this old age pension plan as well. But he was going to fast track his, because he used to swoop down from the mountain mists in his steed and intercept people bringing the money to the local post offices. He would rob them of their pension money and disappear back into the wilds around the Donegal-Tyrone border. Well, folks, this went on for months and months on end. And a backstory I must tell you about the old age pension, because it was a radio documentary on it recently. That they did a documentary and they found out that approximately 3 times more Irish people claimed the old age pension back in 1908 that were eligible for it at the time. And folks, you can trace it back to the gift of the Blarney. Because, you see, it's hard for us to believe now, living in our age of digital records, but a lot of people who were born in the mid-19th century, which was a time of turmoil with the famine, they might not have had their own birth cert. They knew their age, but only within maybe a year or two if they weren't great clock keepers. So the British civil service they were puzzled. What are we going to do about this? So they came up with an idea. You see, back in 1839, there was a very severe hurricane in Ireland. It was called Anguilla Mór, or the Night of the Big Wind. And it caused untold structural damage. It levelled cottages along the Atlantic counties on the western seaboard of Ireland, destroying a lot of boats as well, which even added, which made the famine more severe when it struck less than a decade later. Well, you see, this was the crux question that the British civil servant would ask somebody when they came in to apply for the pension, because they could say that they didn't have it, they didn't have their birth cert. So the crux question was always, were you born before or after the night of the big wind? And sure, of course, they had their stories rehearsed for weeks beforehand. Oh, sure, I remember I was knee-high to a grasshopper, a boohil beg, and I remember the thatch blowing off our cottage, and it landed 4 townlands away, and sure, all our geese were scattered to the 4 winds. Okay, I get it, you were born before you get the pension. And that's why so many people in Ireland managed to draw down the old age pension when it first came out. So getting back to our story with Mark Byrne. Mark Byrne decided that he was going to make an enterprise of intercepting these pension runs. And I'll tell you, he was successful for quite some time. The reason being that the standard mode of pursuit for RIC police officers back in 1908 were rusty, rickety 3-speed black rally bicycles. So if you can picture these lonely Bowereens and Mark Byrne high up on his steed, and these guys, come back, you fecker, come back, come back. He left them in the dust, folks. Well, he got away with this for about a year, and they finally got, all the RIC in the area got together and they lay an ambush for him. And they captured Mark Byrne and they brought him in chains to Sligo jail, which is about 30 miles south of here. But folks, no jail was big enough or good enough to hold Mark Byrne. And he wasn't in there 3 months, but he devised a way to escape one night. And he made his way, by nightfall always, through the North Leitrim glens and back into Donegal. And on the way, he used to sleep in barns, and he stole or borrowed 4 empty wheat sacks along the way. Why he needed them, all will be revealed. He made his way to Pettigo town, because that's where his trusty steed was impounded, and she was being used as well now by the RIC. So he waited until nightfall. He knew there was one night watchman in the barracks in Pettigo. And he waited. He knew that he was fond of a tipple late in the evening as a nightcap. So he waited until he had fallen asleep at the guardhouse. And he scaled over the wall and dropped inside. And very quietly and secretively, he located his trusty steed. But he knew that she was shoed. And if he tried to lead her across the courtyard, which was cobblestoned, her shoes on her feet would go clippity-clop, clop, clop, clippity-clop, clop, would awaken the guardsman. So what did he do? He tied 1 empty wheat sack around each of her feet, or hooves, and he led her brazenly and silently across the cobblestone courtyard, opened the gate from the inside, got up in his speed, and he rode off into the darkness, never to be seen again. Now, some people say that Mark Byrne took the boat to Australia. I prefer to side with the other people who say that he kept his head down for a couple of years and decided to apply for the old age pension himself.